Good evening and welcome to the London Ballet Circle. If this is your first in conversation, I certainly hope it won't be your last. You're so welcome to be with us tonight. This evening's guest is Jamiel Devernay-Laurence. Jamiel's a dancer, filmmaker, producer, entrepreneur. With all those things on his CV, I think tonight we're going to have some very interesting avenues to explore. And leading us on that path is Deborah Weiss, well known to all of us at the LBC as a very good friend and a brilliant dance writer. So if you would like to ask a question of Jamiel, you're more than welcome to do that. Please type it into the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And if you'd include your first name as well, that would be great. So I think that's all the housekeeping. I don't need to give you fire instructions or anything like that, so let's launch into it. Please welcome Jamiel Devernay-Laurence in conversation with Deborah Weiss.
Good evening. Hello, Jamiel. It's great to have you. And I'm really excited to be asking you about what has really happened in the last little while, and how your career has changed path, and you've really become quite the entrepreneur in terms of moving the profession forward in certain areas. So right now, I want to ask you a little bit about your background and your start in ballet. So tell me where it all began.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, the London Ballet Circle. And Deborah, I'm glad we get to talk a bit more about all the stuff we talk about. I was taught ballet by my mum. That's the sort of long and short of it, really. My mother was a dancer. She'd done various bits and bobs, and she had a child, which was me. And I was pretty much in the ballet studio from day three because still had to teach the ballet class and keep things going. And I was exposed to dance from a very young age, dance, music, drama. It wasn't really ballet only. There was a lot of tap, a lot of jazz, a lot of dressing up in lots of costumes, which never really went away. And yeah, after a while, I went to private boys' school, the natural next progression. And when I got to about 12, I was told, you will be a lawyer, you will be an accountant, whatever. And I was like, actually, I'm right. I want to do what I do on my Saturdays and my Wednesday afternoons, whatever. And so, yeah, this is all in East London, I should say. So this was in Bow, where we received the blessing of Princess Diana, who came and, saw it all with Andrew Mawson at Bow Church. And then this was in the Docklands near Canary Wharf, when it was literally Canary Wharf and just these warehouses with ballet and just some taxi companies and fish storage nearby. So I was doing all that, and when I got to 12, I decided, it wasn't for me. As much as I loved all the cricket and rugby and all the crazy stuff they were making us do, military service at 12, I decided I wanted to do the other thing, which is quite good, really, to make that conscious choice. I know there's always a bit of your mum forced you into it for sort of theatre kids sometimes, and there wasn't too much of that. So I I went to the Arts Educational School Tring Park, which is now called Performing Arts Tring, some other fabulous name. Lots of things I did when I was a bit younger have all disappeared, changed name. And I did everything. I did hip hop, I did jazz, I did break dancing, a lot of that. I did ballet, singing. I had to do a lot of A levels and GCSEs because my father, who was with me at the time, was, still got to do all your education. So I pushed a lot in those areas too. And then when I got to the end of my second year of sixth form, back then it was like an absolute failure if you didn't have a job at the end of sixth form, like 17 and a half. The head of dance there made that very clear. And I then realized, I kind of went to another conversation, which was realistically to interact with this ecology that I'd realized I could get a job in because actually, I lost my father when I was 16, and I didn't realize I was kind of dancing but for survival in a way. All my artistic endeavors kind of have a survival coping mechanism element to them. And I realized I could do this for a living, but I realized from literally the second audition, I was like, everyone's looking at me, but I'm doing all the wrong things when they are. So I went to Central School of Ballet and I said, to Bruce Sampson at the time, ex-Royal Ballet principal. Help. There was some tears and some drama, and he was like, yeah, no problem. You know, it's a really strange atmosphere back then. I think the student loan backed model for dance education in the UK was very new, so they were still able to say, get in the back and start doing your tonjus. And I basically said to Bruce, I know what I want to do, I don't know how to do it. And after a few months in first year there, I was moved to second year, which I thought was a promotion, and I'd done really well. And the first year teacher actually said, he's a really good friend of mine, but he was like completely unteachable. and then I met Paul Lewis, and Paul Lewis basically said to me, Jamiel, if you're going to do this, it's this or that's it. You're going to fail in life completely at what you're trying to do. Not completely, obviously. So yeah, I stuck with Paul. Obviously not having a father, but having a male figure step in and really take charge meant a lot to me. Having someone to work hard for, someone that would not tolerate any nonsense whatsoever. There was a lot of go out, come back, or do the adage again, do it a third time, do it a fifth time. So I had what I would call the real, you know, the tail end of the real deal of dance training, the positive stuff anyway. And then while I was in that same year, I then was in third year because I'd done loads of jazz training, lots of partnering. They started us partnering at Tring when I got there, basically at 12. So I was like, put that girl above your head. And I was like, really? I feel like this is premature. But no, we were straight up there. We had Irek Mohammadov, we had Errol Pickford. We had loads of really good teachers that were training us alongside the in-house team like Terry Wright and many others. And yeah, I had really good partnering and could do a lot of jazz. So I found myself dancing Matthew Bourne's Signets, which worked really well for me and my body, and this jazz number. And I didn't know, unbeknownst to me, Ashley Page watched the show and said, have a job. But he didn't say have a job until about a year later. So a couple of months went by after I'd done those shows, and Bill Glassman, who's the absolute legend of teaching at Central School of Ballet in the old building, the condemned thing that was condemned for about 30 years before I got there. He said, you're going to Scotland tomorrow. And I was like, okay, great. Didn't know why, didn't know there was a Scottish Ballet, didn't know anything really. And I was a Londoner through and through. And I was in Scotland and I did class. Nobody watched. Ashley didn't watch. He came in at the end and he said, come to my office. And he said, I'm giving you a job. And I said to him, hang on a minute, I need to give you a CV. He was like, oh, okay, took the CV, chucked it over his shoulder. And that was that. I was in the club, really. I was individual, I was driven, and I had something artistic that Ashley could see. You know, it was by no means all the way there, not by a long shot, you know, but something that he could develop into what was his very unique company of personalities. And personality was something I could kind of bring to the table. And I think the only caveat to add really is that while I was training in ballet, I was also training in computer technology. I was Saturdays either a Royal Ballet Associate, or I was also a Trinity Laban. It was called Trinity College of Music back then, back in the 1800s. And I was a music scholar there, doing music technology, which introduced me to the idea of editing, but perhaps not in the way that I eventually got stronger at, which was video. And lots of other stuff, from like bow and arrows to you name it, cross country. I was being chucked into things by I know it meant a lot to my mother that without having a father there to push me in certain directions, she was always keen that me and my brother got to do loads of exciting things that the school often had a huge problem with at Tring, and Central just didn't ask about. There wasn't any time, you know. So Central was the formative place, and we were up and touring shows, multiple works. I ended up in all of them. And that's very similar to Scottish Ballet, where they basically had what I was doing, but at a massive scale. And I think the last thing I would say as well is Chris Gable, his vision was for dancers to understand how the show gets made. So I was screwing in lights, I was cleaning costumes, I was rolling. I'm still rolling floor to this day. Can't seem to escape that task. Cleaning floor as well. But yeah, we learned to do it all. We also learned that, you know, wardrobe's the center of all gossip, and don't tell the massage therapist anything if you don't want anyone to know about it. So yeah, company life was already sort of in session by the time I got to Scottish Ballet, which meant I kind of landed with on my feet.
So what were your aspirations at Scottish Ballet, really?
I have no idea. There's such a, it's really like I see the next thing, I see the next thing, I see the next thing. I mean, the first aspiration when I walked in the room for the audition was my future wife sitting in splits on the ground, and she looked up from her newspaper and was like, "Oh, not another London auditionee." And I knew then that there was something that was going to happen here, because as soon as I saw Constance, it really was a sort of love at first sight moment. But career-wise, I was partnering Constance shortly after. So, if it was 3 turns, I wanted to do 4. If it was a two-handed lift, I wanted to do it with one hand. I still had that kind of weird competitive energy. And I think I met some real greats at Scottish Ballet, like Paul Liebert and Adam Blythe and people like this, who and of course Sophie Martin, Claire Robertson, who were the kind of older generation above me and Constance and that. And they really instilled in me the idea that it's less of a competition and more of a kind of marathon. And then, of course, the director changed, which was a very dramatic moment in the company's history. I was there in the studio when I always compare it to when Cedric Diggory's son dies in Harry Potter. It was sort of the height of emotion I'd ever experienced. But I was also a little bit like, I've just got here. And Ashley Page was kind of saying, I wanted to see what was going to happen to you. No. But then Chris came along, and he had a whole completely different type of plan. And I learned what it was to be a repertory company dancer, where the volume started to pick up, the number of repeats and shows of things started to pick up, and being relied on to know the work when it came back. And then as this was all progressing, the next goal came along, and that was choreography, And I have to say, actually, the moment Ashley Page walked in the room, I thought, well, look at that, director, that looks fun. And then when Chris was choreographing, I was like, look at that, the choreography, this looks like a good laugh. So I took choreography very seriously, and one of the great things Chris did is he did a choreographic challenge every month, basically. He taught us the idea that your first audience is the cleaner at the end of the day, kicking you out studio. So there wasn't as much. I mean, there were elements of provision of space, but it was much more about if you've got something to say, find the dancers that want to say it with you, and make it happen. So the sort of School of Hard Knocks continued in a way. And then while that was all happening, the ambition gets bigger, doesn't it? I want to dance bigger roles, but I also want to make bigger things. And I was on a really good track. Luckily, a really good friend of mine, actually doesn't actually speak to me anymore, he said to me, "Oh, what you're doing in the studio looks very cinematic. Have you thought about filming it?" And I was like, "That's on my phone." He's like, "Really? You should get a stabilizer and see what that does." And I think the idea was I was supposed to give him the stabilizer, but I wouldn't let go of it. And I was running around the room filming stuff. And before I knew it, the BBC had seen what I'd done and said, "Oh, you should make a film on your phone," which I thought meant I'd get a whole team and I'd turn up to this venue with all these people. And they were like, no, it's you, the phone, you're directing it, you're editing it, we've got no budget, we're in the middle of a crisis in the arts. And I just over-delivered. So, I was over-delivering as a dancer where I could. I was over-delivering as a creative. And then I started over-delivering as a director without being a director. And that's kind of a problem in a company situation. So I started to have ideas and thoughts, and I was starting to clash in the clouds, really, with my leadership. And not in a negative way, but, that wasn't my job. And then right at the moment when all of this could have, exploded in whichever direction, boom, we had a lockdown. So obviously none of us expected that. And I got COVID really bad. And it was the first moment in my life, actually. Well, there was this one time in the south of France, but we won't talk about that. It was kind of the moment where I thought I was going to die. I couldn't breathe. All the other stuff, like I couldn't taste and all of that was fine, but like I really couldn't breathe. And we were on tour in New York when COVID hit. It was almost an all-male tour because we were doing Prejs Le Cage at the Joyce Theatre. And, the New York was taking it very seriously when we got there, which I don't think the UK was in the same way. And, on the subway with masks and people not going out, this was already kicking off over there. And the audience on the final night we danced before they final cancelled it was probably soloist Scottish Ballet Rambo Batron. It was like his family and his mother-in-law. That was our audience for our last show. My last show, actually, properly with the company, I would say. So, it was all a very, as I imagine for everyone, a very difficult period. And I wasn't getting better, but I didn't want to go to the hospital because it was very clear, as we all know, that TV was saying hospital equals death, don't go there. So I started to recover. I changed my eating. I changed a lot of things that felt right for my body. Yoga entered my routine. I was very lucky that dance was enough to keep me in shape in all the right places. And yoga came along to kind of actually evolve and really get me back to where I was. And while this was all happening, I kept getting stuck at the same set of traffic lights when we were driving to Tramway for these kind of small projects I were putting on. These temporary traffic lights. I was like, why do I keep getting stuck here? Why do I keep getting stuck here? And the like the 10th time I got there and I got stuck again. Right, there's obviously a reason I'm supposed to sit here wasting all this time at the traffic lights. And that's when I had the idea for Fun Freelance Dance, and it came fully formed into my head and went straight onto paper. And within an hour, had funding and backing. And that was the fact that I'd phoned all these freelancers I'd always wanted to work with. I was furloughed, so I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. You know, I was making music videos in Bristol. I was doing stuff in London. And all these people who I adored and I respected and you know, dancing that had kind of shaped me into what I was, they were telling me I'm working in Amazon, packing at the moment, or you know, I'm struggling to where I live. I have to move back in with my parents at 30 plus, because there was no help for freelancers at that time. And I know it changed later, but the original idea, Fun Freelance Dance, freelancers back into work safely, back into the studio and return to their craft and back working on paid engagements. And one of the things that happened is I started to innovate around pay. So I was saying this is a daily rate, and freelancers were going, all right then, as many as you like. You know, I was saying a pianist should be paid this, a photographer should be paid that, and I wasn't always getting it right. You know, they might say, oh, actually, usually it's this, or this is the union rate, and I'd say, okay, well, let's add 10% on that, and let's set a new standard. So yeah, I started to get involved in the not just the ecology, but the economy of dance, and that was a very exciting turn. So I mean, I'm kind of skating over the fact that I'd made some ballets. I'd done some stuff for Scottish Ballet. I was always the events guy. Like if there was a space that was impossible to work in, needed a highly unusual either length or something, or was with some really difficult music, it was like, get Jamiel to do it. So, you know, I remember I turned up to Celtic Connections and I'd been told I had a 7x4 meter stage and I had a 22-meter apron by 2 meters wide, and like I thought that was my greatest story ballet, and I had to like adapt it to this sort of 2D mania, you know, doing all this sideways acting, but it worked. And I was very fortunate to not be put on the standard pathway. Nothing was given to me. Nothing was you know, I wasn't on any programs that they were running at the time that kind of mattered most, and instead I invented my own programs. And Fun Freelance Dance was the kind of culmination of that. And so when I got back to Scottish Ballet, and you know, I was saying it's not that it was controversial, but I'm saying pay freelancers more, look after them, we should be doing this, this, and this. I realized that being in my second cast in the back line of Starstruck with, you know, Gene Kelly's Widow's lovely. I remember thinking, I don't know if I can continue down this pathway. It's a real juxtaposition of trying to innovate and make change, but you know, it's a dance company, it's not a dance Jamiel. So I was never going to get out and say my kind of true thoughts. Would they conflict with a funding body? Would they conflict with a sponsor? Were they just quite frankly nothing to do with what people in Glasgow and dance were worried about at the time? So I made the big call, and it all happened very quickly. I remember my leaving email from the leadership went out 20 minutes after I said goodbye, and they didn't have ChatGPT then. Yeah, it was a big, everyone was kind of shocked really, because people knew that this was going to have to happen, but would I do it? And I did it. And I started to speak more. I got to do lots of interviews in the run up to that decision. I got to realize that what I was saying was not nonsense, or, you know, I was starting to take a position, which is something I think a lot of people are nervous to do in a Arts Council funded setting, which is not the setting that's kind of, as we'll find out, kind of worked for me. And yeah, that was it really. It's not a negative thing to realize that if you want things a certain way, you've got to go and prove it. And Ballet Nights is the ultimate example of this at the moment. I'm doing something where someone has put their faith in me, they've put their money behind me, and they're saying, okay, well, if you think this is how it should be, let's see what happens. Makes sense on paper, makes sense when you're talking about it. Will it make sense in reality? And I'm like, it definitely will. Yeah, sorry. Did you want to ask me a second question there, Deborah?
I wanted to sort of get some kind of perspective on the time scale. So how many years were you with Scottish Ballet?
Oh, 3,000 years. No, I joined Scottish Ballet at 18, and I left in my 30s. So I was there for, I think it's 13 years total, and a bit, and some change. And I kind of danced the first 2 years. Then I danced my ass off the second 2 years, because obviously with a change of director, promotions and things like this, it all goes out the window. All the work you've done to get where you are. It wouldn't be fair, like if you take Aaron Watkin at EMB at the moment, it wouldn't be fair for him to arrive for 2 weeks and just anoint the next emerging dancer without having seen that company kind of figure its way out. And so I always understood that was going to be the case. So I did work really hard, and I got to soloist, which was wonderful. I certainly really enjoyed being able to go out and dance solo. But I was also a bit of a bandage. So, even if it was the third girl from the left at the back that injured herself, it would be like, does Jamiel know? I feel like there was always a sort of weird connection where it'd be me that was thrown into it. So the choreography picked up properly in 2015, because that's when I went to the Edinburgh Fringe, Cotier's Dance Festival, which existed at the time. 2016, I started doing the Royal Conservatoire Scotland, which I was in and out of for about 5 years. I think I'm still listed as temporary staff there. I need to talk to Kerry about that. But I got very close with that organisation. And just before I left Scotland 2 days ago, I was still teaching at Hamilton Dance, which is a lovely musical theatre school there as well. So timescale wise, I left Scottish Ballet June 2021.
Right. So tell me exactly what you were feeling, whether there was a kind of sense of relief that you were able to follow your own path then, or whether element of thinking, what have I done? Because you haven't got the umbrella of being in a big ballet company, and you've really got to make your way. What were your emotions at the time?
Well, I think the survival instinct had kicked in that I was talking about earlier, and I still haven't, like, one day I'll figure out what I mean by this, but dance as survival, doing things that continue to keep you in the game. I felt out of the game. I felt like I'd done a lot of international touring, which I'm forever grateful for. But I was starting to say, when I was there, I wish I'd connected with more people to see what I could do there. But then that wouldn't be compatible with me also doing the shows. I remember I filmed a short film on mobile for Apple, not for Apple, but with some support from Apple, back in New York, in that week, that final week of my dance career at Scottish Ballet, live dance, that is. And I remember, like, I had one rehearsal to get the choreography on an American dancer, Lloyd Knight from the Martha Graham Company. And I'd found a really clever technology to solve this problem, which was teach it on a very similar height and weight dancer and ability. Keep one guy that was definitely coming on the tour. Hope that hope there's no injuries. Get it all taught, and then have a 3-hour period where we could definitely get it done if Lloyd had time to have a look. Which I don't know if he had, but we found a way. And we were filming in public, and there were all these permits I didn't realize till the night before, so I sorted all that out. So I remember feeling like it's a lot of pressure, what if I had just a little bit more space? And I think the thing I had to do was line up work. So I had a commission from Ballet Island to make a film. I had a music video with Adam Hender. I had a couple of other bits, and I was like, that will at least get me to October, and then we'll see what happens next. And of course, in October 2021, off the back of a really great trip to a golf club in a sort of Make-A-Wish day that a sponsor of Scottish Ballet took us to, me and Henry sat one night at like 3 a.m. talking about our ideal show, because this is normal for, I guess, ballet dancers, I don't know. And that's, we only had a 7-week run up to the first Ballet Nights to get David Dawson's work, which I was over the moon he'd said yes to, and then fill in all the other sort of formats. Because weirdly enough, that 3 a.m. conversation formed the whole skeleton for that format. And Henry was great because he kept saying, what happens next? And then what do you do? And then what happens? And we're just getting it all out and down.
Henry Dowden from English National Ballet.
Yes, Henry Dowden, newly a junior soloist from English National Ballet. He's a really, really good friend of mine. And, in that first show, we didn't know a lot of the production end of what we were doing. So Henry's running up and down towers posting leaflets, and I'm trying to manipulate social media to sort of take over the world with this one show. And, it was still the tail end of COVID. I know some of your audience were there. It was the tail end of COVID. It was slightly nervous at the beginning of, do we wear a mask? Don't we wear a mask? Because they just lifted the mask ban. And And on top of that, audiences weren't necessarily filling houses. And we did 2/3 of the audience, which I was devastated at, but apparently is great, which I found out later. And I think I made a loss. So here's what's important. I used my own money to make that show happen, which was, I didn't know at the time, apparently a cardinal mistake. That's a huge risk to take, but I really believed in it. And most people think I was there to make a show or promote the space or promote myself. And those are all great things. But what I was really there for, which I was conscious of, was as I was standing in the stage right wing, and the crowd was going mental. They were screaming, speech, 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 speech. The word speech snapped me out of what I was thinking about, which is I need an investor. Who is going to support me? This is not Arts Council compatible. This is not the norm. Getting corporate backing for this is going to be a big ask in the time frame I was hoping to achieve. And actually, it's only about a year and a half later that then I did, which again felt like forever, but turns out in sort of business investment terms, it's actually quite a quick turnaround. Yeah.
So that was really when Ballet Nights was born.
Yeah, Ballet Nights is what I thought a show should always look like, and Henry was great at in that evening, funneling it out of me what I was thinking. And even Henry on the night of the show, and all my friends from ENB and whatever that was there, at the very beginning they were texting me saying he's talking, you're talking. Why, there's a lot of talking going on. By the end of the show, speech, speech, speech. So I think that, I didn't think comparing a show was a big deal. I'd always been a host. I would host my mother's dance school shows. I hosted Europe's biggest burlesque night once, which was a last minute ask. And I went, yeah, sure. Give me some makeup. Let's do it. It came very naturally because I knew what I was saying. I was telling people, whether they're absolute fanatics or have never been to ballet before, this is what you're seeing. This is why you're seeing it. This is who you're seeing, which I think is absent from a lot of dance at the moment. And importantly, this is where you can see it next. You might never have seen Kennedy Jr. Montanga's work before, but you just watched him rip a girl's throat out and then she bleeds to death. It might be right up your street. Oh, well, where can you see it next? Oh, he's performing in the Fringe in 3 weeks' time. Or one day, here's National Ballet of Canada's lead soloist. You can watch her perform in 2 weeks' time at Sadler's over there. I'd love to get to that place where we're even previewing and sharing tasters of what's already out there and say, oh, if you like this, it's at the Coliseum tomorrow. And there you go. And instantly we start to repair a gaping hole in dance right now, which is the star in the room is the audience that I feel's been slightly forgotten. I wouldn't have a career without an audience. I'd have stopped a long time ago. And I think that's where COVID came in, really, because I like to think I've got a superpower, right? I felt like I was always doing comedy stuff like Short and Tall or funny characters. And I feel like I could feel when I had audiences or I didn't, or if I've gone down here for some reason, how do I get back up here? I like to track that. I like to feel that. I remember opening Ballet Nights with a joke too soon. Ivana just done a solo, and I said, "Oh yeah, that was my original tutu," or some joke like this, and no one knew what to do because everyone was like, "Do we make jokes at ballet now? Is that a thing?" So yeah, comparing is a huge part of it actually, and always was.
I think it's an interesting idea because it more or less it brings in the audience. It makes them feel that they're being included in everything, and there is often a kind of us and them situation with the performing arts, and particularly I think with big ballets and things like that, you sort of feel almost reverential towards the people who are performing, and to have someone come out and actually talk the audience through it and say, this is what's happening here and this is what you're going to see next. I think it must feel a little bit to the audience like they're in somebody's front room in a sense, and if they wanted to ask a question they could almost. So yeah, I think it's an interesting concept that you've brought in there.
Yeah, and I think it's always happening. Seeing me in that show is an extension of just what's happening in the studio every week now, which, me now being in London and making the choice since January to make my Lantern Studio Theatre push. So the Lantern Studio Theatre it's part of the business that my family own, and because they didn't want to share a entrance with someone renting the top floor, my mother took it upon herself with a team of builders to rip it to shreds, turn it into a theatre, and then basically phones me up and says, "I've built a theatre and you're running it now." And that was in 2011. So I'd only been in the company a couple of years, and I was already having to project manage this thing. And I was writing contracts to Akram, Hofesh, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Cameron McIntosh, all this mad stuff, BBC, Barclays Bank. And that's still going on now. You know, if someone wants to hire the Lantern Studio Theatre, and we are one of the biggest production hires out there, because we can fit, you know, especially in COVID times, especially, we could fit, you know, 50 people with a whole box around them and all the things they need to be safe. The business end of it was kind of introduced to me very early on, you know, at 20, to run a venue that size. I had to come up with a hire agreement from scratch, you know, without the money to consult 10 different lawyers. So I was working off a local council gym hall hire agreement and then augmenting it from there, which turned out later to be what a lot of venues do, because every venue hire is different. And when you're in that venue, now there's always dance happening. I'm usually about, people are in there having the most exciting conversations. And it removes that nagging doubt that what you're seeing is being designed at you in some way, is being forced on you in, oh, it means this, or we're tackling that subject. I think whenever you're at Lanterns, you're so close. I mean, if you're stage side, so we've got these 4 ticket tiers, and if you're stage side, your toes are on the stage. It's right in front of you. You can't really dispute that Stephen McRae will be tap dancing and sweating all over you. It's happening. It's not something we can, you know, it's not something we can say isn't, or any other way. And Stephen's great because, as an example, as was Frola when he was doing Don Q, because you do see them on these massive stages. And if you see them in a smaller venue, there might be some compromise. But on a 17 meter by 17 meter stage, which is, you know, for those that don't know, that's an opera house size stage. The only step above this is you're in the piece. And we could explore that together. I don't know, maybe Deborah will bring you back in there. So the venue is also a key player. Audience, venue, acts, and someone to guide you kind of through it.
Yeah, so I just want to backtrack a little bit, because it would be really fantastic if we could watch a film that you made with 2 English National Ballet dancers, Aitor Arietta and Henry Dowden, and it's called To the Sea. Is that right?
That's what it's called, for sure. This film was made at a time when you were just about allowed to travel. Maybe not with the ballet company's permission, but we're all friends and said we need to do something. And we basically all got together on the end of September, so it's freezing, and sprinted down the beach. And then the sun came out, and so we ran into the sea. And that's basically why it's called To the Sea.
Let the war come alive. We'll feed the virus appetite as your chemicals turn. So absorbed we were killed by the air. Make your order online. Pick your color and your favorite design. Let your skin be a feast. Kill a stranger for a trip to the beach. As our arena comes of age, this infection burns the day. We're running away from a thief. God save our an explosion of art.
I absolutely love that. I don't know what it's the feeling of freedom. You've really, really captured that sense of abandonment and sort of, I want to run into the water after them. That's how I feel.
I literally was running into the water because it's all shot on mobile, which is all my films are on a phone. I just wanted to run into, like, I was like, God! Like, there's a sort of you can't help when you're told not to do something, but feel a kind of resistance, right? And I know there was all these real reasons why we had to do what we were doing, but this was at the tail end, and when I was really starting to struggle with the same room, the same place, the same people, and Henry just said, right, me and Aitor get in the car, I'll do it. And we drove to the beach and we ran into the sea. And it was September and the sun came out, which was a huge surprise because I didn't tell them, but I'm pretty sure it was like a storm or something predictable. I was like, no, we'll film it, it'll be fine. And I have to give a big shout out to Constant Vigier, another choreographer who was my runner for the day. So as we're running along with everything, he's behind with all the equipment, and he's only a little guy, so he's like carrying all this stuff. But yeah, no, it was brilliant fun.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think the other side of it is that it's actually quite touching because there is sort of camaraderie there, and you can feel that there's a bond, and that's so sweetly shown at the end when they're just sitting in the water. It's fabulous. But you've done a lot of other films as well, and you have won some awards, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah. So all my films are at jamiellawrence.com under, I think, screen. So you can go to jamiellawrence.com, click on screen. I did some stuff for the BBC. I made one about video games in a response to the question from Google. Google asked me, do you have free will? So I made this thing about video games. My brother ended up a last minute drop-in for that film because we had an injury and all that. But yeah, there's a load of films. I think apart from one, they're all shot on mobile. And there might even sneakily be hidden some full works from places that I've snuck in there too. Exclusive announcing here. But yeah, lots of stuff on that website if interested to see more.
So I want to go back to Ballet Nights because the next lot of performances are coming up, and you have got different people. So you've got 2 performances at the end of September, 2 at the end of October, and 2 at the end of December.
Yeah.
So first question is, do you think you are likely to turn this into a monthly venture that happens over the course of a year? And second question, how do you manage to get so many top-notch people and companies and such a variety to come in and do, because all the programs are different for September, October, and is it November or is it December?
It's September 29th and 30th. It's October 27th, 28th, and November 24th, 25th, which are like tattooed into my brain now. And we'll have some spring shows as well, February, March, April, May. We're going with the idea of a season, so autumn, spring. Maybe there'll be another autumn, or if it's really popular, summer. And we what we want to be doing is building this. I know, first of all, there's a lot of questions that I'm getting, especially on Ballet Co Forum, for example. What is this? What's going on? We want to be the kind of jazz club for dance, and I think there's no better place to be talking about this than on the London Ballet Circle. You are the audience that will appreciate the opportunity to have pictures, conversations, access to the stars of the show, seeing new stars that maybe aren't being celebrated because there is no more dancing times. Dance Europe is now 6 a year and possibly being reduced. You know, these are tough times for the celebration of the artist, and I think what's being forgotten is that celebration of the artist. We got here with people like you, Deborah. And you know, it's been a long time since a Wayne Sleep or a Darcy Bustle made that transition into TV or give them their own TV show, or that's why there's a big video production element, as many of your listeners may or may not know. If you go to youtube.com/@Ballet Nights or just balletnights.com, you'll find that we've done the highest standard of podcast you can record, basically. We've done behind the scenes that would match a Formula One effort on a sort of take a deeper, closer look at the driver or the engineer. I'm always looking outside of dance for what's working. I was horrified to read an article. I'm sure everybody knows the article. We have a Royal Ballet and we have a Royal Opera House. Why do we need an English National Ballet and an English National Opera? And my answer still remains, how many football teams are there in London? And are they struggling to sell tickets? No, they're so popular that Arab billionaires are all fighting over who can buy the most. So I feel like dance, like football, like Formula One or any great athletic sport, it's something you dedicate your whole life to. This much energy goes in the front end. If it was my case, I felt like, and then you go through the funnel and out the other side, it doesn't feel like the equal and opposite comes out, and I have seen queues around the block for my wife, for example, Constance, signing programs after the Nutcracker, or people who still want a picture, regardless of whether we've got social media or not, want a picture that's theirs and signed, of them with a dancer. And music festivals still do a meet and greet after the show, which is how our backstage pass event was kind of born for those stage side seats. You can meet the dancers, get a picture in front of the stop and go board like the Oscars. These are to celebrate with the artist, but also to celebrate with the audience. And artists want to be communicating with their audience and not just on subjects that are pre-decided depending on what funding will be given. There's a real freedom in having a backer that believes in what we're trying to do, and can it's no secret to say that our investor is a huge fan. They're huge fans of ballet, of dance, and they like a cast sheet. I think everybody here likes a cast sheet. Asking everyone to scan a QR code while you're being rushed into the theatre because they've got to try and get the show up on time. Some of these technologies aren't quite working right. And that's why with our process, we are looking at old technologies and new technologies. We will engage with AI for various reasons, but we will also print a program. So it's an experiment as well. We will make mistakes. That's the biggest thing to say here. And I always said in the first Ballet Nights on the Ballet Co forum, I want to hear from you. Who do you want to see? What do you want to see them doing? And this is what I say to the artists. I say, what are you trying to say? What is it you want out there? And that's why Stephen's tap dancing. Because originally the conversation with Stephen was, could we do a pas de deux? Could we do this? And then I realized that wouldn't be true to what he's trying to do at the moment. And then when we podcast Stephen, which I can't confirm the date on yet, but in the near future, he's probably going to be talking about everything but ballet. And that's because you want that deeper look at those people that you then see far away up on stage. Or at Ballet Nights, right up close, depending on where you sit.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I'm just trying to think also, the people that you have brought in. I noticed that you've got people like Musa Mota, and then you've got Melissa Hamilton doing and the York Dance Project are going to do something, and New English Ballet Theatre. They're just so diverse, all these things. And I wonder how you got to that point where you were balancing out your programs and trying to make them work.
Well, I've been chasing Musa for about 2 years. I've been trying to get him to do something for ages, and he didn't know this until I met him at the National Dance Awards, which was very handy to have a wife winning over there, and he's winning. And I was like, can I have a chat with you? And we turned that around in a week, because it's very clear to me what each artist wants or would benefit from. And sometimes they don't even know they would benefit from it. Melissa's got a huge following, and she's often at these galas, which are great. But how many of these galas are being reviewed? Not many of them. We have, almost 30 members of the press at the moment booked for our opening night. That's a lot of press for a show that isn't in Sadler's Wells. And that's because it's to do with curation. And I think curation is another thing that it's hard to get it right. You have to have sort of a feeling for it. You have to sit yourself in the chair and experience for yourself what you would want to be seeing. And I think, after a very tough period in history and with all the things going on in the world, I would like to have a good time. And to have a good time, there are those things that you can set alongside very serious works that create relief on the other side. So if we think about David Dawson, his UK premiere of Metamorphosis 1, no pressure for me and my team. We've also then similarly got, Musa giving us, I've heard the music today, so I'm able to exclusively reveal the music's great. Something more upbeat. Constance is going to be dancing a new work by Jordan Bridge in that same program. These things balance out. And alongside all of that, we've got Elton John's piano. So if this could make even less sense, we have this piano that Elton John gifted to the venue through Yamaha Europe. And concert pianists all over the world want to play it. So we have Victor, who is a bit like our Saturday Night Live band. He's our in-house concert pianist, and he's preparing 6 different works that pretty much do everything you can do to a piano before it's on fire. And that's how we start each act, with that kind of palette cleanser, something you don't often hear classical piano on its own being celebrated, then with dancers, and then maybe we progress to recorded music and things like this. So again, it's an experiment, Deborah, and I might not get it right the first time, but I do feel like it's about having a format, taking a position, and sticking with those decisions that you make, really. I'm very happy about all 3 programs, and it was as much a surprise to me as it was to anyone, because everyone says yes. I literally haven't had anyone say no, and I've got a queue for spring, because this is good for everyone. If you can see a work you don't usually see, especially on a company that might not usually be in London, such as Northern Ballet, it just allows you to keep touching base and having a touch point with maybe a show that you would definitely buy 5 tickets to when they come to Sadler's for their big number.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's the other thing, is that I get the feeling that those artists that are working with you they have a feeling that they can have their voice heard in perhaps a capacity that is slightly unexpected, like Stephen wanting to do tap, and things. Obviously he has become quite well known for doing tap now, but yeah, I think it works both ways, that the artist will be willing to do whatever it needs, in order to get them out there doing something different. So that's wonderful.
And Vasco as well with Stephen. So Vasco's a real, he's a 50-50 part of that package, and then Victor's on the piano, so I'll probably have to redo those percentages. But and Vasco's a huge Bulgarian star in violin, and I discovered this through this process. It's funny how there's one way of looking at it, which is you go to the best and then you discover it that way, or you, through a process of trying to find a perfect formula, discover that you're already finding those same people. So it's a real ringing endorsement for a lot of these artists. I'm very excited about Joshua Junker's work in the November program, which is danced by Felicity Chadwick, who nobody knows, because Felicity Chadwick graduated from Rambert School. It's not someone that's found their way into any major company yet. I'm sure she will after. And she's dancing at the Royal Opera House for this Royal Ballet young choreographer, who also wouldn't usually move outside of some comfort zones that he's used to with all those dancers around him. And of course, Kevin O'Hare's supporting it by giving us the access to the studios, costumes, things like this. So it's all a kind of weirdly family effort in a way. I feel like everybody wants this to happen. And it's up to me and my team, my amazing team, by the way, those that are listening on the team. I couldn't do this without any of them. They're also stars of the show in a big way. And they're getting us over the line on delivering this thing, basically.
So, Susan, if you're there, I'm just wondering if we need to move on to questions at this stage. You there?
Whenever you want. It's fascinating. If you want to keep going, please do. And another 10-15 minutes would be super.
Okay. I'll keep going. But I am just going to make a little announcement here. Jamiel has kindly told us that it is the night before his wedding, and his first wedding anniversary to his lovely wife Constance. So I just thought I'd get that in there, and congratulations on that, and thank you for agreeing to do this when you really should be preparing for your special day tomorrow.
Wednesday, but it's fine. I feel like we got there. It was a big part of the journey getting married to my wife Constance. I danced with her since I was 18. We did it all together. You know, I got to see the highs, the lows. I was there for all the promotions. It's funny, like sometimes in a dance company, it's obvious who the couples are. And I don't think we were an obvious couple. There were many people that joined and then realized later we were together. But, you know, Constance now leaving Scottish Ballet and moving on to, I mean, also winning the National Critics Circle Award. That was a huge moment. And going on to her career in screen, all will be revealed soon, I'm sure. It's great to have her available to throw at these choreographers as well, literally, because she's so hungry to dance it all. Today, she was working with Jordan Bridge. I'm hoping to pair her with many of the other creatives who are coming to me and saying, I want to do a Ballet Nights. We're just turning that corner now, actually, where some of the artists who'd kind of either not read my email properly or said, yeah, I'll come to it later. They're coming to it now because they're like, I want to be on the same stage as Stephen, and I want to be on the same stage as Melissa and Rio and all that. And don't think the artists are passive, actually, because, you know, Rio, for example, he might not be a choreographer, but he certainly made it make sense for me how a principal thinks when it comes to a show like this. If it wasn't for Rio, we really wouldn't be here, sitting here now. He built with me how this approach works. So you don't come across as a crazy person saying, please be in my show. You know, it's much more of a very realistic ask. And me understanding what a rehearsal process is and knowing where the demands are and aren't. Yeah, as I said, they're very active, these artists, and a lot of them have a lot to say. I was talking to Precious Adams, who finally got to my message, and we had a chat together on Google Meets or Zoom. It's all the same. And yeah, we talked about dance, but she also talked about her serious chops in marketing that she's training up, and social media aggregation and things like this. So I think there's an entrepreneurial flair to this that might equal a solo on stage, but might also equal making connections so that our global audience will soon be having a Ballet Nights, whether it's in New York or Australia. You know, I keep saying that Stephen McRae, would be a fantastic host for Ballet Nights Australia. Similarly, I would love to get in contact with Tyler Peck if she's here today, so that she could host the New York edition and we could get all the Isabella Boylston crowd in, and, you know, James Whiteside, and get them all performing too, with Lloyd, who I'd love to reconnect with. So this is definitely by the artists, for the artists, and all of this has really been unlocked by the huge backing and investment from Alexis and Francis Pren, who give to many things in the wider dance industry and have put a big amount of trust in me and my team to get this over the line.
That's incredible. And it would be fantastic, actually, if it could be, you know, New York based and Australia based, etc.
Hawaii would be lovely, but we'll see if we can establish an audience there first. You know that when you book Ronnie Scott's, you don't say, oh, I want to go and see Sarah so-and-so at Ronnie Scott's. Or some people might, you know, but more people often than not say, I want to go to a jazz club. I want to go to Ronnie Scott's. And I think at first there were those that were skeptical, but actually the idea of a Ballet Nights, oh, I'm going to a Ballet Nights tonight, I'm going to a ballet night. I think that pastime could start to become a thing that people recognize. Oh, have you been to a Ballet Nights? Last time the guy there shaved his head on stage. No, of course not. He dropped the mic and thing caught fire. The idea of going to this different pastime, and it's complementary. It's not designed to replace the main stage. It's also not designed to replace any emerging, you know, scratch nights and platforms. This is this kind of missing in the middle moment where you can really either get closer to those you've been following, or make the decision to say, you know, I've never been to ballet before. I'm going to go and see what this lunatics and his friends have got to say, and hopefully they like it.
Well, I think also the element that if you've got enough good people always performing, there's going to be something for everybody on that program, you know, and if you get the reputation for bringing in, even if it's very diverse genre and that kind of thing, you're still going to have people thinking, well, these shows, they're really, really good and the standard's high and he's always got good people on there. So, and that will help spread the word and lessen people's anxiety about perhaps spending money on something that's unknown. They know they're going to get a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, and also you say that in the context of, you know, you might not be a big fan of contemporary dance. Like, say for some reason you're not keen on Cunningham and Graham based stuff. I don't know. You know, you buy a ticket to try it out. You've got to sit there for an hour and a half, continuing not to like it. In a show like this, you've got these 3 to 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15-minute snaps. You know, there'll be some people that like a concert piano. There'll be some people that will be in the state of meditation by the time Victor's finished. Everyone's going to have a very different experience. And I remember after the show, the first show, as I was taking the lights down because I couldn't afford to do the get in the next day, the get out the next day. I remember listening to the audience saying all these different things about all these different artists, and many of them had never been to a show before. You know, the East London local Muslim community are not known for going head over heels for ballet every night, and they, some of those work for the community centre and the school underneath us, and they came to the show and they said to me, "When's the next Ballet Nights?" So yeah, and you know, you might get to see Darcy. And those of you that haven't listened to our podcast, this is Darcy. She's fully posable and is another star of the Ballet Nights ecology.
But faceless.
Faceless at the moment. Someone for one of our future podcasts, yet to be announced, has talked about giving her a costume. Yeah, she's fairly flexible. It's got 90 degrees.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's anything else we want to know about your filmmaking. If there was something else that you wanted to talk about that was particularly successful, body of work in the film.
I think at this stage there's not much of a retrospective happening in my mind. I think I'm focused on the next and the next and the next, and I think Dan Ehrman at Arctic Zoo, he's come on as our video producer, which started with a few behind the scenes shots, and then he's filming his longest form, highest quality podcast, and bringing in massive lights to do behind the scenes with ENB at Royal Ballet Company. Thank you to them for the space. Getting to make the jump from director who has to hold the camera, which I really loved, you know, and the mic and the lights, to then being a director of a DOP, a director of photography, but then also giving Dan, you know, he's a very accomplished producer, and giving him sort of more broad brushstrokes of, you know, could we increase the connection to what the dancers are saying in this video, or could we get closer to Jordan because people don't know his face as well. It's very exciting to be in a sort of broader editing process, working collaboratively. Fun Freelance Dance is all about collaboration, and collaboration, it's amazing. It's like a shield against all these sort of negative forces in the arts, because as soon as everybody's agreeing, there's not much to argue about. And so working with Dan, working with our team, our investor as well, you know, we all have a big say, and we all hear each other out, and I think that's a very important thing moving forward. I really want questions from not just the London Ballet Circle, but all ballet fans, and I want them all the time. I want critique. Kerry Nichols, who many might know as working with Tamara, first at EMB and now out in San Francisco Ballet, she gave me this lesson on critique, which felt like it was invisible and no one else saw it, because I never hear anyone talk about this stuff. You've got to be able to take critique, and you've got to learn from what's being said. And I, you know, East London, son of a dance teacher, I can take quite a beating anyway. but you know, real critique from audiences. I'm very excited to hear what people like, but also what people would like more of. What could be done better? Is the drinks menu diverse enough? Is the show too long? Is it too short? Would you like this? You know, I'm keen for that. I don't see. I was always funny about reviews as well. I would read them over and over and over. I think dance writing is a real lost art, and there aren't enough dance writers left, because, you know, that's how you bring the game forward. That's how you move things forward. Formula One, which I'm obsessed with, came to what it is today through Drive to Survive, the documentary. It wasn't until someone said, hey, maybe talking to the drivers and the engineers and the people that watch the race might engage more people. And now you've got all these grandmas in Sussex worried about tyre degradation and qualifying times and tenths and all this stuff, which I think is amazing. And I think, you know, opening up the studio in this way, opening up rehearsals, podcasts where we're talking about touring our cat or whatever, suddenly it's a lot more easier, you know, it's easier to connect. And just to reiterate, without a Dancing Times and without Dance Europe coming as often, where are the audience getting this information? Where are the young people getting this information? Because if it's Instagram, we're in big trouble. And so I'm doing what I can there as well with this more informative content that's kind of not teaching, but just helping people kind of say, what is that? Oh, that's why he's doing that. It's a piece about, you know, XYZ.
Excellent. Right. Shall we move on to some questions from the audience, if that's okay, Susan? I have got one here. 1 second. Oops. That's sort of disappeared now. It's weird. So anyway, Fiona is asking a question. I'm a huge supporter of the compare idea. I do feel audience members don't have a chance to read a program anywhere before a show and will appreciate learning about what they will be seeing and why they have been chosen. It's quite a big difference to how other galas have been, or rather have not been, presented. How are you creating cohesion across the program for the night rather than it being a series of disjointed pieces? That's from Fiona.
It's a really interesting question. I'm going to say something really controversial for the London Ballet Circle, but you could watch the most amazing tutu ballet pas de deux and then follow with 5 more tutu ballet pas de deux, which is what my experience of galas has been so far. And then maybe you get a long skirt for, like, you know, sort of divert over there. But the thing is, in that case, I don't know if you would need an artistic director like me. I feel like you can reach a fatigue level with a certain thing, whether it's a subject, whether it's a style. I think it's about keeping it really fresh and not over delivering. You know, less is more. We're not trying to present a 2-act, 3-act Giselle or whatever. We're not presenting Sleeping Beauty, but we are hopefully showing the best bit, the cool bit, the bit that makes you want to see more. You know, that bit of the scratch card where you might have won £1 million, but you're not quite sure yet. You don't want to reveal the whole thing and you lost, and then it's like all the other scratch cards. I don't know if that analogy rings true actually or makes sense, but I'm going to keep it for the future. But yeah, I think that also I've just remembered from Fiona's question why there's a compare, especially, which is I didn't have the budget to print a program. I could only do double-sided A4 sheets, and even then I think my family's company charged me. So yeah, having a mic allowed me to make sure that anything that wasn't on that piece of paper, which in that edition was what the piece is, was literally being communicated in a way that at first was arresting, because usually you don't have someone telling you you're about to see a story about a woman who fell off a cliff. You know, usually that's what you read in the program or whatever. But we don't have 2 hours to tell a story, and we might not have a sort of tome of a program, although I am excited about the program this time. But yeah, that won't affect the comparing. Comparing will still be there. And we want these programs to be really something collectible that trigger the memory of what the actual event was like, if that makes sense as well.
So I've got a message here from Cheryl in Bexhill, who says she just adored the film that we showed, and she says, did you use a steady cam, and how did you get such smooth shots?
That's a really interesting question, which I'm sure Dan, my video producer, would dispute. But I don't think anyone can run with a camera like me until I met someone recently, and I can't reveal her name because she's on the TV production that Constance is involved in. But basically, I'd never met anyone that would pick up the camera themselves that was a dancer and start to pad in the way they were moving. So in a lot of the films, there's even someone I'm literally sliding and dancing. So it's quite an active activity. I know I've posted some behind the scenes on my Vimeo channel and on my Instagram channel, but basically, you know, you can't run down the stairs with a camera over your shoulder or on a gimbal. You're actually not allowed to. But with the phone, I remember the BBC were like, well, technically he's on the phone, so he's not actually holding a camera. And I wasn't going to, you know, wait for permission anyway. So yeah, this sounds really weird if you're not a dancer, but there's ways you can run. There's, you know, I have control of my plie by being a dancer, so I can actually descend really smoothly while bending my legs without a sort of jolts and wobbles and things. Yeah, when I'm with the camera, the way it's not always very smooth, which is my, you know, ultimate frustration. But yeah, there's a lot of dance in there I choreograph myself into the capture as well. Yeah, I have to say this question makes me want to make more films as well, but there's only time for so much.
So this is from Rosie. Ballet Nights is a refreshing addition to ballet lovers' options. Sometimes at Covent Garden, I look at the audience, nearly all white, over half elderly, including me, and worry about the future. I hope this enterprise will help to encourage a new audience for dance. I think that's a great point. You know, what you want to do is get new people in who might not have been brought up in it, and they just suddenly get a taste for it because of what you're...
Yeah, I mean, this makes me think of two things. The first is the Royal. I think even Kevin O'Hare can agree that the Royal Opera House, you know, it's quite a daunting building. It's very big. You know, Lantern sits on top of a nursery school and a dance school. It's up some weird stairs through a building that was actually originally designed to be a rehousing centre where you'd get your signing on forms and whatever. And the theatre like just shouldn't exist there. It's a real TARDIS, if you know your Doctor Who. So there's something about our venue that, first of all, is it's not necessarily more inviting, but it feels like you've made the choice to come in. But I think that the show could then make you the choice, especially if you're, you know, finding that very overpowering experience, to go to that in future. You know, I'll be directed. I said this to EMB recently. I'm sending audience your way. I want more people. You know, if we help EMB and Royal Ballet and all these companies sell their shows, especially those outside of London, this is only a win for the wider dance ecology. And then the second answer to that question would be, you know, about the sort of diversity element. And my mother has been teaching the £2.50 ballet class in East London since 1980 something, right? And I've listened to a lot of stories about which ballet class was for me, but you know, the Lanterns has 30 years of history on the Isle of Dogs in East London, and before that in Bow. And I grew up with literally well, basically everything you could find. I have friends to this day that feel like, how did you meet? I don't understand. You know, this, I thought this wasn't going on. There's a deep history in East London of everyone being welcome, young, old, whatever background culturally. I think that Ballet Nights is for everyone in that sense. And I think that compared experience gets away from what's perpetuated in the movies of, you know, you must be in a tuxedo, you sit in a box. You know, a lot of people think to see a ballet, you have to sit in a box. They don't know there's the other seats and things like this. So yeah, I'm making the show that would sit alongside a stand-up comedian, a late night with Jules Holland, a smoky jazz club. These are all places that people feel like they feel a membership without there being a membership. It feels like something that you go to it once, you try it out, and then you say, actually, I think this might be enough. And then one day you say, do you know what, that Royal Opera House, that small man keeps going on about, I might go give it a visit. And then they do, and then it's a win for everyone, really. So yeah, Ballet Night certainly benefits from having an audience that sits that close as well, because you can hear the dancers breathe, see them sweat. You know, it feels human, and then it makes it more superhuman, because you're like, they're doing this amazing stuff and it's right there. There's no sort of wires attached or whatever. You know, it's not a trick. And yeah.
Actually, I'm just curious about the fact that for the dancers, it must be quite difficult. It would make me very nervous to know that the audience could hear me breathing and and so that must be a little bit sort of tense for them, and to know that they are sweating all over the first 3 rows.
You can't see what you're seeing anywhere else. And I feel like when you give ultimatums like that, it's very dangerous. But, you know, in the first Ballet Nights, as Fiona and the others that were there in this talk, you know, we had a dancer retire. Now, he told me that day, just before he went on stage, could you announce this will be my last show as a principal dancer? I was like, oh my God. So he announced he was leaving the Scottish Ballet. We had Katia fly in from Ukraine late for the tech and then have to have a little sleep before she kind of bounced back into being Don Q again. We had standing ovations. We had people shouting encore. I'm just going to throw it out there now. I don't know how we encore this show yet. I haven't quite solved that yet. But yeah, you aren't getting this experience anywhere else. And I think something about the fact that there's an opera house sized stage, and the seats are stretched across. I mean, I just make up technologies as I go, but I call it theatrical widescreen, because you actually physically have to like turn your head to watch some of it. That's how vast it is, and yet they come right up here with the stuff that they're doing.
There's a question here from Jane.
Mm-hmm.
All your shows seem to be in London. What about the North?
Well, there's two answers to that question. For me as Jamiel, there's a lot going on in the north. Constance, she runs the Grand Prix Scotland, Ballet Grand Prix Scotland. We've got some events with them in Edinburgh coming up. Obviously, a lot of my artist base is in Scotland. However, I did go up there in Q1 and Q2 of this year and just lay the gauntlet down. If you want to do something, we'll back it. What's the story? And I didn't get much response. And I think that there is a sort of starvation for the freelancers up there at the moment. It was sort of too much too soon. But on the sort of Ballet Nights front, it's really about where the audience is. It's not going to make economic sense yet for me to take Ballet Nights somewhere that doesn't want it. And at the end of the day, we are leaning heavily on a group of people that really want this to happen. But once we build the use case, once the Ballet Nights autumn season is over, I'm praying that we'll have a whole host of places that want this to happen with them. So it's really just me out there, as I'm doing at the moment, finding the venue, finding the people. It's important that we don't export Ballet Nights London to Ballet Nights, for instance, New York, or Ballet Nights Edinburgh, wherever we did it. I would want to work with the Edinburgh International Festival. I would want to work with Scottish choreographers and artists, of which there are many, of which I'm a former member of that team. And even if we go to, I don't know, Ballet Nights Helsinki, I'll be looking at which principal dancers, which soloists, which unsung heroes, because I think a big part of Ballet Nights is new discoveries. As I said, nobody's ever heard or seen Felicity dance. I think after Ballet Nights, she goes into the Snowman at Sadler's Wells, the very popular. So I think that it's a very interesting question heading north, and obviously there's a big thing in between Scotland. One of the things that's amazed one of my investors, Alexis, is every time he calls me, I was either in Scotland, Wales, London, Birmingham, usually with Elmhurst. I love T-Bay services, which is kind of in between that kind of Preston, Scotland range. But yeah, I have been actively around every part of the UK. And obviously Ballet Nights is the current focus. Where we go next, I mean, we'll see. But we won't be going because we're told to go. We hopefully will be going because we're asked to go. It will be something that's wanted, I feel.
I've got another little message here from Fiona saying, sitting so close in Ballet Nights is a really special experience, like being in a studio. Same question as Deborah. Brave for them to see audience eyes. I think, yeah.
I mean, I was always hungry for that stuff, so it's really hard for me. And I think that it's funny, there could be like a sort of 5-stage, 6-week coming to terms with things situation for some of these dancers if they're treated a certain way. But I think with artist management, knowing the right thing to say and explaining things right, I've seen dancers turn corners immediately. On the podcast, Luke had never spoken on a podcast before. By the end of the podcast, couldn't stop him talking, which is hard with me on the same thing. And I think there's a way of managing them into the space. Rio for Concerto with Melissa, well, if you're feeling this certain way about it, what would make you more comfortable? But yeah, don't underestimate how many dancers want to get out and up close to all of you. They certainly want to see you in the after event as well, if you're in the backstage pass crowd as well. And I've been talking to Susan, and we're working on it. I know a lot of companies, which we are not, but I know a lot of companies do behind the scenes events for members of London Ballet Circle. We will make something happen. I have got acts in rehearsal at Lanterns. I've also got some unusual stuff that isn't really a rehearsal, but a behind the scenes photo shoot, or even a podcast where you could ask your questions to those artists live. So lots in the pipeline. We're going to get even closer than just up close on stage.
Fantastic. So I think that's all the questions, unless someone wants to pipe up quickly with another one. shall I hand back to Susan?
Well, before I say goodbye, I'd just like to say one thing. My questions are for you. I would love to hear from you, Jamiel@balletnights.com. Everything that we've talked about so far is on balletnights.com. We are 60% sold stage side for opening night, which is my marketing team today. We're like, make sure you say that. And yeah, we're on all the socials, we're on all YouTube, but we're also trying to get into more dance publications and places, more traditional methods as well. So do feel invited to have your say. Do feel invited to say, I want to see Precious Adams dancing Christopher Bruce. I want to see, I don't know, Stephen McRae dancing Tutu Zali November, whatever it is. I really would love to hear ideas for what audiences want.
Great. Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. And I can assure you, London Ballet Circle members are not afraid to voice their opinions. And I think you will hear
Cool.
Ballet Co-Forum or whatever. A few months ago, we had Constance as our guest. And so tonight we've met the other half of this amazing young couple who are doing wonderful things in dance. And it's been just tremendous. It's been a real insight into the world of a producer, an entrepreneur. And it's not just the desire to put on a show, as they used to say in the old Judy Garland movies, hey, Judy, let's put on a show kind of thing. It's the passion and the creativity. That's what makes this for a success. And it's obvious, Jamiel, that you and your team and the dancers, you've got that passion and you've got that creative spark. And that can only pay off for us, the audience, with a new and exciting experience. So we're looking forward to Ballet Nights and whatever else you've got in your mind there, because I have a feeling you're fermenting things 24/7. But it was just fascinating. Thank you.
Well, I need to get Deborah back on stage as well, so I'm just still figuring that one out.
That would be super. Yes. And thank you, Deborah. You did a great job, as always, asking all the questions we wanted to know. So thank you. You're probably all quite sick of me reminding you that the London Ballet Circle is a charity. We're dedicated to helping students achieve their dreams. And you're probably sick of me asking for donations. If there wasn't such a need, I wouldn't do it because I don't feel comfortable doing it, but it's what we need to do. So if you feel so inclined, please visit our website, www.tlbc.org.uk, and click on the donate button. Thank you. Our next In Conversation is September 11th, when Birmingham Royal Ballet's Celine Gittins will be our guest, just ahead of the opening of their much anticipated Black Sabbath. On October 9th, we have Aaron Watkin, the new artistic director of English National Ballet. And on the 8th of November, Daria Klementova will join us. All these 3 talks will be Zoom talks. And finally, just breaking news, we haven't even got the booking up on the website yet. On December 11th, please join us at the Royal Ballet School for an in-person talk with Loretta Summerscales. Loretta is going to be in London dancing with ENB for Nutcracker, and we haven't had a chance to catch up with her for a long time. So I think it's going to be a really lovely night. So remember, members, you need to book for live events. That booking will be open later this week, so check back on the website. So once again, Deborah, Jamiel, thank you so, so much. And Constance, I think you're watching. Thank you for letting us have Jamiel this evening. I'm sure he's going to treat you royally for your wedding anniversary, and congratulations to you both. And thanks to all of you who came on tonight to watch this. And we will see you at Ballet Nights, and we will see you in September for Celine. So thank you, everybody, and a very, very good night.